Look at all these possibilities for allied races. There's this one, that one, this one? Not this one. And maybe even this one. Which of these could we very well see in the near future? Hey guys, Gongrongzong here, hope that you're doing great. Just a quick plug before we start. I've been streaming on Twitch for the past month or so, and it's really been a blast, interacting with you guys live and sharing all my experiences in-game. A big thank you to all of you that have been coming in regularly, and if you haven't had the chance to tune in yet, make sure to check out the Twitch link in the description below for fun, laughter, peace and pandas. So it's been a while since we visited the subject of allied races, what with all the negativity revolving around Blizzard. But as future patches of BFA draw closer, I thought it would be fun to throw out some ideas of the most probable upcoming allied races. Before we begin, I think it's important to list out the various criteria that allied races will probably have to fulfill, based on what we know of the existing allied races. For one, they have to be bipedal humanoids, that is, humanoids with 2 upper limbs and 2 lower limbs. Secondly, their skeletal models must be able to wear all forms of armor, from helmets to capes. Third, they should already exist in some shape or form in the game. And lastly, it is likely that they adopt a skeleton identical to that of the playable races that we already have. The last 2 criteria are not hard and fast rules, but the more that a potential race adheres to all these points, the more likely it is that they could become an allied race. So let's get into the first one. One of the most likely allied races that we could see in an upcoming patch of BFA are the Gnomes. Yes, these awesome cyborgs were announced in this year's BlizzCon, accompanied with their own ancient and lost city, Mechagon. Quoted from the Blizzard panel, a mystery awaits that is of particular interest to the Gnomes and Goblins. A previously closed vault in Kul Tiras has opened, and within it a radio transmitter sends a signal for help and points to new lands to explore. Mechagon. This is an ancient lost city of the Gnomes. The beginning of the adventure is within the Junker Wastes, where heroes will be beset by death robots, but there are potential allies nearby. Hunted by robots themselves, the Mecha Gnomes introduce you to a whole new society and take you to where the higher caste gnomes live, who have dedicated themselves to their king and have embraced robotics. Adding to this awesome backstory, there has already been a degree of foreshadowing from the Junkyard Zone that was added since the beginning of BFA, an abandoned junk heap in Tiragard Sound. The quest for this area is only available to the Alliance, in which we learn that we have no idea what exactly happened to the gnomes that mysteriously disappeared into the vault. Furthermore, Junker Gnomes fulfill the aforementioned criteria for allied races perfectly. They can wear all forms of armor, they will exist in-game from 8.2 onwards, they are bipedal humanoids, and they are based on the current gnome skeletons. To add weight to this statement, we have seen no other creature in-game adopt the skeleton of the gnomes, besides some sort of cyborg or mechanical variation of them. If the gnomes have an upcoming allied race tied to them, the Junker Gnomes, or even the Mecha Gnomes that we will undoubtedly encounter in Mechagon, will most definitely be the most likely, if not only, candidate. Next on the list we have, of course, none other than the Vampira. These little furries have long been speculated to be an allied race, but with the introduction of the assaults in patch 8.1, we witnessed even more evidence supporting our little friends joining the Horde. And that is none other than the fact that they get viciously attacked by the Alliance. So not only do the Horde quest with the Vampira in Vol'dun in 8.0, but also protect them from the Alliance in 8.1. The Vampira also already have their own hubs, ground mounts in the form of the hyenas and giant rats, flying mounts in the form of the buzzards, and even have models for their children. Basically, everything seems to already be set in place for Blizzard to snap their fingers and turn the Vampira into a Horde allied race. They can wear all forms of armor, have a wide array of emotes attached to them, and their models are identical to the skeletons that the goblins in-game use. To add to this, the Vampira are also mainly traders with a nomadic caravan-like lifestyle, which fits in perfectly with the agendas of the money-minded goblins in seeking them out as an allied race. If Blizzard is planning to add in a gnome allied race for the Alliance next, it makes perfect sense for them to introduce a goblin allied race on the Horde side at the same time. With the sheer amount of hints that Blizzard is directing towards the Vampira, it is very difficult to discard them as one of the top contenders for the next allied race that we may very well see in a future patch of Battle for Azeroth. For number 3 on the list, we have yet another goblin allied race, the Gill Goblins. You may or may not have heard of these guys before, so allow me to share with you a short backstory on them. We first encountered the Gill Goblins in the Cataclysm expansion in Vashur, the one and only underwater zone. In short, they are basically the underwater variant of goblins. Physically, they differ in their skin color, which is usually a shade of blue. They also possess gills on the side of their necks, along with webbed hands and feet. However, these evolutions have seemingly affected their intelligence, and they are no way as intellectual as the land goblins that we are as accustomed to. Regardless, they are still very much driven by greed, hoarding anything from simple shiny trinkets to large pieces of equipment. What makes all of this highly relevant though is that at a recent BlizzCon, Gill Goblins were announced to be making a return in patch 8.2. Horde players will be befriending the Gill Goblins in Nazjatar and aiding them against the forces of Ashara and her Naga. In addition to this, the Gill Goblins were actually created by a prominent Horde goblin, Hobart Grapple Hammer. One of the lines of dialogue that he says on Kazan is, "I just wanted to make sure that you appreciate all of the products that my genius has brought to the Kajaro Trading Company. These include an entire list of items, including at the very end a mention of the Gill Goblins." So not only do Gill Goblins fulfill all the aforementioned prerequisites of an allied race, they were created by a Horde goblin and will ally with the Horde in 8.2. Surely, that is more than enough compelling evidence for them to be a top contender for the next Goblin allied race. Number 4, the Vampiric Forsaken. Next on the list, we have none other than a potential Forsaken allied race, which could either be the Sandlane, a race of vampiric high elves, or the Vampire, a race of humanoid vampires that utilize an identical skeleton to Nathanos' new model. Just for a bit of background, the Sandlane are the race of undead vampiric elves that we encounter primarily in Icecrown Citadel. They are a sect of elite high elf warriors and casters that were resurrected by Arthas following his campaign into Northrend in Warcraft 3. They are extremely powerful, and in Battle for Azeroth, are enlisted by Sylvanas for advice and tactics against the Blood Trolls and Gehun. A large part of their viability depends on what the next expansion turns out to be. Many are speculating that we will be returning to Northrend, a campaign revolving around the return of the Lich King, Bolvar, or at least some sort of connection to it, even if he doesn't turn out to be the main villain. If we are in any way, shape or form returning to Icecrown Citadel, the Sandlane are definitely a strong contender for a new Horde allied race. Nathanos is already using the model of the human vampire, and the Sandlane have at least a very cordial relationship with Sylvanas. If the next expansion truly does revolve around a theme of death, it would be the perfect time to introduce a Forsaken allied race. For number 5 on this list, I decided to include an interesting one, Draconids. That's right. Now for those of you who are familiar with the model of the Draconids, you may be saying, hang on, these guys don't conform to one of the most important allied race prerequisites, which is that they must be able to wear all forms of armor. And you're right. That's why I'm not actually referring to these original bipedal Draconids, but instead this Dragon Man model. We first encountered this model in Blackwing Descent in the Cataclysm expansion. His name was Maloriak, and he was originally a human that was fused with the corpse of a dragon spawned by Nefarion. This isn't very different from how the original Draconids are created, either through intentional alteration by the Dragonflights or very strong magics. Physique-wise, they utilize the same model as Worgens, and so fulfill the criteria of adopting a current playable race's skeleton, and to make it even better, an existing playable race that does not yet have an allied race attached to them. To add on to this, Tom Chilton, the former game director for WoW, mentioned in a 2009 interview the possibility for a future playable race of Draconids, and that the concept contained a lot of potential in fleshing out the Draconid race as a whole. Furthermore, it was also mentioned at the 2010 BlizzCon that the Dragon Man was based on an unused concept for a scrapped idea of a playable race. So we know with a certain degree of certainty that the idea has been discussed and even developed upon. Story-wise though, how will these guys fit in? Well, let's not forget that the entire chromatic dragonflight was born out of Nefarion's experiments. The demise of Deathwing, Nefarion, Sinestra, and Onyxia has left the surviving members of the chromatic dragonflight weak and without a leader. It is entirely plausible, just like the Sand Lane allying with Sylvanas in BFA, that this dragonflight could seek out a faction to ally with in the future. However, a stronger lore reason would likely be required for the re-entry of a race of dragons. And what better character to do this than our dear old friend Raytheon? If you were lucky enough to obtain an unscarred black scale drop from the island expeditions in Battle for Azeroth, you would discover that Raytheon is not only alive and well, but is actually actively searching for the Dragon Isles. What exactly are the Dragon Isles, you may ask? Well, they are basically islands located north of Lordaeron that were actually intended to be a level 65 to 70 raid, and could even be visibly seen on the Vanilla and Burning Crusade world maps. However, the idea was eventually scrapped, and in the maps of the Wrath of the Lich King and onwards, the islands are no longer visible. It would only be 10 years later that they would be mentioned again in Battle for Azeroth. To top this off, an initial render of the area was actually done, and was even added to the BFA game files during beta. However, it never made it to the live game. Could the next expansion involve Raytheon yet again? I see no reason why not, and I see no conflict either with a return to Northrend expansion that involves the Dragon Isles in one of the future patches. Lastly, in line with the introduction of the Gill Goblins, we have the Alliance counterpart. This new mean-looking Jinyu model. Just as the Horde will be allying with the Gill Goblins, the Alliance will be befriending these new Jinyu in their fight against Ashara. The original Jinyu that we know of had been introduced since the Mists of Pandaria expansion already had lots of people speculating about their potential in becoming an allied race. They are strongly allied with the Alliance, can equip all forms of armor, utilize the existing Night Elf skeleton, and possess their own unique forms of architecture, lifestyle, and culture. They are also the natural enemies of the Hosen, in which we have seen in more than one instance Hosen working alongside the Horde and even being enlisted into their armies. Personally, I think the Jinyu would be a fantastic addition to the Alliance. It has been a long time since a bestial race has been added to the Alliance, and the Jinyu seem like they would fit in seamlessly into the culture of the Alliance. After all, they had already pledged their support to the Alliance in the war on Pandaria. Pledging their support for the rest of the war on Azeroth doesn't seem far-fetched at all. So those are my top 5 choices for the future of allied races that have the potential to occur within the next few years. That is not to say though that there are many others with potential that could become playable. In light of this, I decided to make a quick honorable mentions list. So in no order of priority, here we go. Number 1. The Broken. The Broken fit in perfectly with Ivory criteria. They exist in-game, they fit into the story, and many Alliance players want to play them. However, due to the fact that the Lightforged Draenei have already taken up the spot of a Draenei allied race, and that we already have 4 allied races from the Legion expansion, this seems incredibly and tragically unlikely. But personally, I would pick a Broken over a Lightforged Draenei any day. Number 2. The Earthen, Frostborn, Iron Dwarfs, or the Wild Hammers. All of these Dwarven allied races make perfect sense. They are either allied strongly with the Alliance, or are already a part of them. However, the Dark Irons won over all of these for the Dwarven allied race, and Blizzard has also officially declined any option of the Wildhammer Dwarves being playable. Number 3. The High Elves. Touchy topic this one. I made an entire video detailing them too. In short, Ian has stated that High Elves are Blood Elves. So if you want to play a High Elf, the Horde is there for you. Number 4. The Sethrak. There has been a lot of speculation over whether the Sethrak might become an allied race, and no doubt they are a strong contender. They utilize the Worgen skeleton, and already have both male and female models. However, there are a few strong reasons working against them. The first is that they are mostly evil and hostile to the player character, with only a very small sect allying with the Horde for a short duration. This already counters them joining the Alliance as a Worgen allied race, as they have shown zero allegiance towards the faction. They have also shown very little reason to want to actually take part in the faction war, and mostly just want to stop Mithrax, which we eventually do in Uldir. Beyond patch 8.0, there is very little reason for them to return as an allied race, and their storyline has mostly been already used up, so to speak. If Blizzard chooses to create an explicit reason for their return, then perhaps they might be relevant again as an allied race. But as of right now, it seems that the Sethrak truly were, as Blizzard stated before the release of BFA, just utilizing playable character models for the sake of design convenience. Number 5. The Mok'Nathal. With the reintroduction of Rexxar in Legion and his rise to prominence in BFA, there has been talk of a future Mok'Nathal race joining the Horde. Now don't get me wrong, Rexxar's new model looks absolutely awesome and badass. There also exists a Mok'Nathal village in Outland that is allied directly with the Horde. However, there is zero reason currently for the Mok'Nathal to take part in either faction's affairs. They have been left in Outland for the past 10 years and have no reason to come to Azeroth. Also, considering how the Horde already have the Mag'har from Draenor, it is very unlikely that Blizzard will revisit Outland to reconstruct a similar allied race storyline of enlisting aid from other worlds. And that's a wrap. Again, I'd just like to emphasize that these choices are merely my own opinion. Please feel free to disagree with me, and definitely let me know in the comments which races you guys think make sense and which you just wish you could have even if they don't make sense. As always, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in Azeroth.